This podcast is proudly sponsored by RecLab, Perth's first ever fully dedicated recovery centre. If, like me, you are seeking peak physical and mental performance, you have to go down and see Pete and the team at RecLab, located in Wembley. They've got everything you need: hot and cold plunge pools, a steam room, traditional sauna, compression boots, a hyperbaric chamber, and much more. All designed to get you performing at your best and keeping you there. Best of all, the space is designed to foster community, which makes it the perfect place to catch up with mates while improving your overall well-being. Their pre-sale memberships are on offer now, so head to reclab.com.au to secure yours. And if you mention myself, Egan, and the podcast Timeless Mindset, you'll get some free merchandise when you sign up. Welcome back to Timeless Mindset. In this episode, we are joined by Mark Hughes. He founded One Life, Live It, a personal coaching program to help empower and transform people's lives. I loved hearing his personal stories and how he transformed his life around. Expect to learn about why he left home at 15, his rock bottom experience, how he learnt to become vulnerable, why he is envious of the current generation, why meditation and breathwork are so powerful, why society creates pigeonholes that we get stuck in, plus so much more. He has lots of life experience and wisdom, and I found this conversation so interesting and I learned a lot. But before we start, this podcast of mine is a major passion and I love sharing these stories and ideas, but I also do like seeing the 5-star ratings increase. It does show the impact is growing and it makes me happy. So if you could press the 3 dots in the profile and click rate show, it would definitely mean a lot to me. Thank you. Let's begin. Mark Hughes, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So before we go back to the start of your journey and sort of connect the dots in the timeline, tell us what you currently are doing, before you get back to the start of it.
Sure. So we're running a number of sort of coaching programs, and the idea is what we're doing is actually helping people who, probably the easiest way to put it, kind of stuck in life, lack of purpose or lack of direction, not quite sure where they want to go. A lot of that tends to be that sort of early middle-aged crisis, if you like. You sort of get 20, 30 years into work and you get to your mid-40s and you're not quite sure what if this is what it's all about. We do have people who are struggling with depression generally, and they're just trying to sort of break out of things, and obviously there's a lot of trauma tends to be attached to that. So our coaching programs, we do work one-on-one, but we often run we have the Warrior program and the Breakout program for teenagers and the Buddy program, which is for sort of under 12s. And they're kind of 3-month programs where we have a program and outline that we follow, but everyone's different, so we kind of tailor it as well, where we're really kind of getting you immersed and really trying to shift mindset and behavior. And within that, we're using a different number of modalities, from coaching training that we've done through to literally from cold water exposure, breath work, just really refocusing the mindset and giving some sort of sense of purpose around what people are doing and finding something that they find exciting in life and giving them some goals to aim for, and really trying to get people to actually stick to that as well. So half the problem is actually the discipline around that and what does that look like to actually kind of do these things even when it gets a bit harder and kind of keep pushing forward to see that growth. And then on the side of that, we do run community ice baths. We did the world record earlier this year. In January, we got the world's first ever biggest group ice bath for a Guinness World Record, which was a lot of fun, but really around raising awareness of the benefits of cold exposure and breath work. And it happened to be a Guinness World Record attempt, which we made. And then we do breath work as well. And that's everything from functional breathing to helping perform better in terms of athleticism, just your general daily breathing, and then through to the more sort of deeper breathing exercise and trauma release and things like that. So we kind of cover a variety of those breathing modalities as well. So, yeah.
When was your first ice bath?
Oh, I should actually have an answer for this, but I'm going to figure it for the next time anyone asks me, I'll give you a direct date. But it's about 9 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago, first one. And that was, it kind of came out of probably some muscle recovery, because I'm sort of big on surfing, windsurfing, all the sort of ocean sports. And obviously muscle recovery is a big thing. Coming from the UK, the water's so bloody cold there anyway that I don't know if you need ice baths. But this was more for, hey, the ice baths are actually really good for your sort of mental health and a bit of tenacity and discipline. And I kind of tried it with half a whim around the idea of, because I wasn't quite really into into that self-development that I am now into, I suppose. So it's more just a case I'll give it a go. So it was about 9 or 10 years ago.
You know, a couple hundred years ago, they used ice bath as a treatment for depression. I found that very interesting, and we've sort of gone away from that. Tell us, I guess, so I read your story on your website, and probably the first thing that I saw was you left home at 15. So take us back to, I guess, your upbringing and, I guess, a little bit about you and your life.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and keep it into a nutshell. I tend to waffle on a lot, so you jump in. But yeah, I mean, I left home at 15 because I didn't really get on with my dad at the time. There's nothing wrong with my family background, and I put that on the website. I actually had technically a good upbringing, but yeah, I just didn't get on with dad. Terrible teenager. All I wanted to do at the time was literally go windsurfing. I was in the UK, and it was their mistake for getting me into swimming and sailing when I was 3. So I'd been a sailor all the way up to then, and then I discovered windsurfing, which is kind of growing rapidly in the sort of 80s. And I just, all I wanted to do was windsurf. I was okay, so it was kind of like, well, I'm just going to go and sort of travel the world and go windsurfing. And they just wanted me to get a job in the bank or go to uni and stuff like that. So I finished school early, the way my birthday lay, and I just finished school. I wasn't smart. If you can take your exams if you want to take them early. I scraped through, but technically I finished school. So I could leave, and that was the deal. They said, well, when you finish school, if you want to leave, you can leave. They just assumed that would be at 18. I just did it at 15. Got out and never really went back, but I did, after 10 years, rebuild the bridges with my dad, who's sadly passed away now. But I think in going away from that, it then just goes, okay, the world's open, what do we do? And so just discovered the world of windsurfing. About 2 years later, I drowned. On paper, I drowned and got revived. What
happened there?
I was windsurfing and came off, and it was a stormy day, waves, and went under a wave with very little air. I got winded on the way down, hit the water, got winded. So I hadn't got a lot of air in the lungs, but did maybe now the classic of swimming the wrong way. I swam down instead of up, and literally was just out of air and had to breathe in.
Where was that?
It was in the north or the northeast of England, on East Anglia. There's a little sort of a surf break up there on the eastern coast where we were, and I kind of woke up on the beach being revived by this big hairy guy. It wasn't ideal when I finally came around. They got this big beard on my face of this bloke of all the things that could revive you. But yeah, I kind of went under. I remember taking that first breath in, which was excruciating, painful. And it's like having needles shoved into your throat and your ears and everywhere. And then that second breath, I remember it vividly being, the water's gone through the system, and then, you actually become quite calm and start sort of, you're basically passing out, I suppose. And you just go to that sort of place where, having read a lot about near drowning or drowning experiences, it's very peaceful. Lots of memories from childhood days, which then I spoke to my parents and grandparents about and said, well, you were literally like 2 years old, and said like flashbacks. By default, you can't really form proper memories until I think it's 3 or 4 so years old. So I was kind of lucky, but then that gave me a bit of a not a healthy respect of breath work, but I kind of got into a bit of more sort of deeper breathing and trying to hold my breath for longer. I remember talking to my dad at the time, or latterly, and I just sticks in my mind he could hold his breath for 5 minutes, which I just thought was legendary. It's still 5 minute breath hold is pretty good. Yeah. But that got me into sort of breath hold and free diving, and then a lot sort of spanned over the next 10 or 15 years before I then got properly into free diving, and then that opened up my eyes to sort of more the breath holding, and then actually that was breath work, and then breath hold for surfers, and we sort of run breath hold for surfer courses, which is all about having an elevated heart rate and being in a stressful situation and still having to hold your breath, and different exercises around that. And there's several courses around it now, and a lot of people doing that sort of stuff. And that kind of just led me down that path, really. And then in growing up, I suppose, as I went through those years, I moved out to Australia, went through Europe and taught windsurfing and a few different things, and did many different jobs along the way. Went to uni just to get the university grant in the UK so I could windsurf every day and ski in the winters. So I ended up with a degree by default, and that degree got me into Australia. That was the big plan, but it all sort of almost happened by accident. And looking back on it now, that's how so many people live their lives, is by accident, not by design. And that's where you get to where I got to in my early 40s. and things started falling apart, and you start going, well, hang on a minute, I haven't really, after I was sort of 15 until about early 20s, I'd had a real focus, and all I wanted to do was windsurf and compete and so on. There's no money in the sport unless you're like literally the absolute elite. I wasn't the absolute elite, but it was an amazing period of time. But then you sort of just drift through and do other things, and that kind of wobbled a bit. My relationship suffered, and the business that I had at the time suffered. And there's all the stuff I put on the website, because in hindsight, when we kind of started with One Life, it was really as a result of going through a pretty average time, seriously considering whether to be here or not, and then kind of coming out the other side of it, and then people saying, well, what have you done? Because you sort of seem to be the same person. You haven't shaved your head, and you're not living in a yurt in the hills, and you still drink coffee and red wine, but you've clearly, something's really shifted in your life. And then having those conversations, and then someone sort of putting a hand up and saying, hey, can you talk to me a bit more? Can you help me a bit? And really One Life evolved out of that. And I think putting my story on there, even though it is quite lengthy, I suppose, in terms of what I went through, it's kind of the cliff notes. For me, it's like, well, that's the biggest impetus for saying, I think I can help some people, because this is what I've been through. My wife's come from an insanely difficult background in Argentina, and a very difficult upbringing in completely different ways, and she's very good at helping people. Anyone can do a coaching course, or we've done several coaching courses and counselling, and learn all those sort of things, so to help communicate a little bit in those situations. But you can go and do a degree in psychology or coaching and counselling and so on. And if you don't have that life experience, then with all due respect to anyone out there, it's very hard to then actually be able to empathise with someone who's going through this stuff. And I sort of fall short of dealing with people who are suicidal, although we have had a couple of suicidal people, which kind of came out once we'd got introduced to them and had a couple of sessions with them. It turned out really well, but I wouldn't choose. That's definitely not an area that I feel comfortable in, and we would just definitely refer those type of people for other sort of help. So really, it's all evolved around that story of sort of breakups and business suffering badly, and going one step from being broke. And I know loads of people have gone broke, and they've had marriage breakups and everything, and they've come back and doing amazingly well too. So I think those sort of life experiences, combined with some coaching skills and some breathwork and some ice baths and some meditation and all those other things, when you put it all together, then we can help a few people for sure.
You wrote, I felt like I didn't fit into what society offered. I feel like a lot of people could relate to that. Can you take us back to those early experiences in your 20s, and I guess how you navigated that?
Oh, that's just giving me goosebumps now you said that, because because I still feel like that to a certain extent. And I think that is very much that. At the time, probably didn't have the conscious awareness that I would say now about fitting into society's roles. And that's definitely where me and my father fell apart, because, you do this, you do that, you go that, earn a job, and it stemmed from his background as well. And I think it was a case of, well, I just want, can't we just kind of goof around and have a good time? I mean, I still pay my bills. I don't owe any money. I haven't got any debts, and I pay my rent, and what's wrong with that? And it's like, well, you just force down this certain route where you've got to get a certain job, and you've got to get a certain education, and there are certain barriers in the way if you don't. So I think at the time I felt so outside of that box. All I wanted to do was windsurf. I mean, I taught windsurfing. I worked 6 days a week, and I worked sort of 8-9 hours a day, and obviously the pay isn't very good, but I'd still put myself in a hard working category. I did some labouring at weekends as well for extra money, and when I wanted to go travelling. So you're working hard, but society doesn't see it that way, and it was very, very clear that you're being pigeonholed. And I kind of thought underneath the skin of that, it's like I'm reasonably intelligent, and I've got a reasonable grasp of sort of being able to deal with other people in social environments. So why are you putting me in this hole? And of course, that's what society does, and what everyone, we still do it. And so I just felt really, really uncomfortable with that, and I didn't fit in, and I didn't fit into my family. I didn't have a relationship that was, I'd have part-time relationships, if you like. I didn't want to stay. I didn't want a long-term relationship because I just didn't feel I was going to fit anywhere or stay anywhere for any length of time, which made it very destabilizing. And as a result, now, kind of 40 years later, nearly 40 years, 35 years later, I sort of feel like all those things have kind of come back round. And, there was, you still look at that, still don't quite fit into society. Even doing what we're doing now, you know, I mean, even doing an ice bath, and then we said, well, we're doing a world record attempt, and you know, it's never been done before. Not that it's that hard. There's people who climb mountains in bare feet, and you know, just do amazing, you know, feats of bravery and skill, and we're just running a big ice bath. But even now, society kind of looks on you in a sort of funny sort of way. Well, you know, well, why are you doing that? Or who's to say that you should be able to help someone doing that? It's, you know, they just want to pigeonhole you because you're a builder. I said, well, I'm not really a builder. You know, if you want to put a pigeonhole, then you know, I've got a degree in marketing. I've got, you know, building qualifications. I've been working in this industry with that. I have 3 other businesses I've had in the past. You know, it's like which pick one, but don't just put me in one box, because there's a dozen boxes you could put me in.
Do you think society puts us in these boxes, or we put ourselves in these boxes because we're scared to be ourselves?
I think society puts you in boxes because they, you know, stereotypically that's what happens. It's just how we manage to frame things, to understand things as a society, as a culture. But then the problem is we feel that we're just conforming to that. So to break out of that and do something different, you are, cliches aside, sort of breaking out of the matrix, and you're very alone. And I think that's the problem. People try and break out of it and realize it's really, really difficult to stand alone, because all of a sudden you're looking around and there's not a bunch of people around you. And we've just come back from a retreat we ran in Bali, where part of that is about your friendship groups. And again, a lot of this stuff now in the last 2, 3, 4 years particularly is out there, and a lot of people talking about it. So your circle of friends is so important. And so many people are surrounded by people that, they don't support that growth, because they just don't get it. You know, and then you actually, when you really, really drill down into it, the people who are going to, you know, carry you up and lift you up and support you when things are going well, and be there for you when things are going bad. You tend to, if you really look at it, we tend to be quite disappointed at how few people are there for us. And I think that means that we're going to struggle when we try and break out of these kind of societal norms. But that's why it's tough, and that's why, you know, you've got to keep going, because, you know, if this is what you want, the majority of society is going to be doing something else. They're going to be following that norm, and there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't mean it, but that's why I think we struggle, because it's just not that, you know, the society around us kind of almost like protects itself, if you like. You know, that's the norm, that's easy, you fit in, that's great. So as soon as you step outside of that, people see you as an outsider, and then, you know, people migrate to other people, and you find all these people, but you know, it means you've got to let a few people go. You've only got a certain amount of time, so you might have to let some people go out of your friendship circle, because you need to be surrounded by other people that are going to, you know, have same sort of minded, same sort of mindset. And that makes it hard for people, because they don't want to, or don't know how to let go, or how to sort of reinvent themselves and so on. But in here, you know, that's the bit that you get to my age and you go, holy shit, this is what's going to really, really trip you up if you don't get it sorted, because you're going to go through life and at some point you're going to regret it. But you're also going to have this feeling of discontent, because it's going against your kind of beliefs and your values and so on. And it's great that some, like you doing what you're doing, and other people of your generation, which I find bizarre to be saying. It makes me feel really old. But you guys are going through this now, and you know, there's a bunch of girls and guys out there, lots of them now in their 20s and early 30s, who are doing all this self-growth and all this awareness and so on. And the information maybe is there better, but you are actually starting to, you know, live the lives that you probably really want to, rather than my generation, and certainly my parents' generation, my grandparents, you know, they're very much, you know, and you just follow the dotted line.
Are we being more proactive now? Do you feel like you had to go through the traditional pathway, realize that it didn't bring you fulfillment, it wasn't what it was cracked up to be, and then you had to learn the hard way? Whereas do you think our generation is more like, with more information, people telling stories, people being more open, we're sort of realizing that life's more than just following what other people expect us to do?
I think in my case, you know, I stumbled along trying to follow my own path, and it was really, really painful, because it's just, you know, I'm not going to say there's people who are doing way better than I was, or did way more than I've done. But that leaving home at 15 and by sort of 13, I didn't fit the norm, and, you know, I got out and tried to live the life I wanted to. And in fairness, those first 7 or 8, 9 years were phenomenal. You know, I do specifically remember at 21, and I said to my partner at the time, she asked me something. I said, I've never felt more content in my life. And content could feel a bit like a platitude and a bit bland, but it was quite the opposite. It said, I could not wish for more anything. You know, this is just the perfect life. It wasn't anything special. I was teaching windsurfing, working in a cafe, and living, in a beautiful island. And what more is there? And then then certain pressures come on, and you'd start thinking about a mortgage and what's going to happen in 10 years' time, and that's that sort of pressure that's put on you. Whereas I think, it's been a painful process, but that's enabled me now to actually finally get it. And I don't think had that mindset. I definitely didn't have the mindset or maybe the education, if you like, to then be able to figure it out sooner. I really, really wish I had, of course. In hindsight, you wish I'd figured it out, 20 years ago. But thank goodness I've figured it out now, because that's salvaged, if you like, and then repaired and grew my relationship with who I consider my soulmate. We've got a beautiful daughter now, and it's just stuff that people are just going, what has changed? I mean, this is just bizarre. I'm looking at the same person, but you're doing all this stuff that I never ever in a month of Sundays thought you'd be doing. And it's like, yeah, I'm kind of, I still go windsurfing, as soon as I can. I was sketchily going to try and stop off and have a surf on the way home because I see the surf there. I still do all that sort of stuff, but I want to spend time doing other things as well and feel like I'm actually living a life that I'm choosing to live. And okay, you just don't have to fit the norm. And I think your generation, I suppose, is now coming up with that information. Like you say, you're actually seeing that it really, really is possible to do this. And even the FIRE generation and, financially independent and retire early, there's people out there just absolutely killing it. They'll be retired by the time they're 30. But there's so much influence around that. Outside of, obviously, there's a lot of probably poor influence in terms of social media and other things you've got to deal with as well. So I'm not saying it's easy. It's just there is definitely, I think, a movement towards, realising you have more of a choice of what you do with your life and what it's going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And that own self-growth. And even saunas and ice baths and breathwork and stuff. Before it was just something that was just poo-pooed as some random hippie stuff. And so, well, yeah, now it's almost like it's almost cool to be done, but the science has caught up and the information's there and the studies are there to prove how amazing it is. But it's almost, if you just wanted to take it the sort of the hippie end of the spectrum, it's kind of like it's actually it's almost cool to be doing. So if for whatever reason you're doing it, if you're just trying to be cool, or riding a longboard at 25 would be the most uncool thing to have done 20 years ago. Now it's kind of cool to ride a longboard. And I'm drawing a long bow here, but it's not just it's cool, it's actually a whole skill set in its own right, and it's really great fun. You have a lovely time. And it's like doing ice baths or breathwork or saunas and doing all these other things. It's amazing for your health. So it's eating reasonably healthily most of the time and doing some exercise generally regularly. And so your generation, say, without being derogatory, is fantastic. You're coming up and you're just doing this as part of the course. For 10 years ago, a handful of, I use the word with all due respect as well, a handful of hippies, as it were doing it, and some random people, and of course sports people taking ice baths, but it's now part of the everyday vernacular, and it's really great to see that coming along, which is going to be so helpful. On the flip side of it, you've got an immense social pressure, and it's hard to get into the housing market, and cost of living's gone up and everything else. So there's pros and cons to how you live your life. But I think the choice, you realise that the choice is there, and you don't have to fit the norm, and the norm is changing. So what the norm was 20 years ago is not the same now.
Did you struggle to make that authentic choice because you didn't realize how possible it was because there wasn't, I guess, access to social media? Because I don't know what you'd be looking at. I guess you'd be getting feedback from your parents and other people surrounding you, and I guess there's a lot of other people instilling their own limiting beliefs onto you, and there isn't, I guess, this counter voice, which is often now social media giving you information, giving you opportunity to see what's possible. And I guess it's really hard because there's so much uncertainty when you're young and trying to figure things out. You sort of just latch onto that security. Yeah. So what was your experience like with not being able to, I guess, see the other side, the possibilities that there were?
I suppose it's just in reflection, because not having that I was just going down, I'm invincible and I'm just going to do I was rebellious as well. So it was kind of, I wasn't deliberate. I didn't leave home at 15 because I just wanted to rebel. I just wanted to get out, and I wanted to teach windsurfing, and I wanted to windsurf every single day, and I wanted to be a professional. And my parents are looking at, well, that's just ridiculous because you'll never earn any money, and how do all the sort of stereotypical sort of things of talking to someone who, kid like that. And arguably they kind of are right. I mean, maybe I've made it into the top 2 or 3% of windsurfers in the world. Yes, you can make good money, or like any sport. If I was a cricketer or a tennis player or a golfer, at my level, I'd have been making really good money as a good amateur, person. But it wasn't about that. It was just about following something you're passionate about. I ended up having a windsurfing shop and a couple of businesses around that, and you're never going to make money doing that. But we had a lovely time. It's it sort of eventually kind of maybe it's got not beaten out of me, but then I just thought, well, actually I want to move to Australia. So how am I going to do that? And the only way I could get here and stay here was I actually had to get a degree, and I had to go and do this. I had a plan. I had to go and do a degree, which took 3.5 years to get a degree, to get the points, to then get the experience. So it took me 5 years to get my passport and residency to come to Australia, but I wanted to live in Australia. I just wish I'd done that 10 years before as well. But you kind of stumble around, and I say in that process it fell apart because I didn't have the foundations of the framework when life did get a bit sketchy to be able to hold it all together, and I didn't have the tools or the mindset to deal with it. And lots of things fell apart as a result of that. And, it could have gone a very, very different way for me, reflecting on it and living in the back of my truck for a short period of time, admittedly. But I did have a house. I just didn't want to live in the house because it reminded me of the relationship I had that wasn't there anymore. And I'd seriously considered whether I wanted to be here. And from my being a sort of free diving, I knew which way I wanted to go, and from drowning in the past, and so, well, if there's ever a way, I think that's the way it's going to be. So I seriously considered how I would do it. I don't really know what changed my mind or why. I contemplated quite a bit, but I suppose ultimately it was a case of no matter how bad it gets, what now? And so, well, either you literally get on and take your life and just get it over and done with. You're selfish, but get on and do it. Just stop whinging. I'm only whinging to myself, or change something. And for me, it was like, I'm going to change absolutely everything because nothing's been working. I'm the main protagonist in my own story, and so it must be me, which ultimately it was. But at that time, after 43 years of, and leaving home at 15, that period of time, I've lived my own life how I wanted to on my terms. And there's a lot to come to terms with when you realise that it hasn't panned out how you wanted it to. So, yeah, I think it's a case of being accountable and then going, okay, well, I don't know what the framework is that's got me here, but now I can see there is a framework and there is lots of stuff I can learn and lots of stuff I can do. I've just got to open my eyes to it and be open to the process of change.
How did you get out of, victim mentality? I hate using that word sometimes, but it can be the situation where you've gone through so many things which I can't relate to, but how do you change your mindset from, the extreme thinking, what's the point in this, to what you're doing now and the changes you've made? Take us back to those isolate those moments, and I sort of just want to understand what were the drivers of change.
It's quite hard. It's interesting. You're triggering a few things here in a good way. So I'd probably cry at the opening of a paper bag, but I could feel myself welling up now because that time I just remember being in the back of my truck at the beach and I'd considered it for a long period of time, and the relationship I had with my wife was up and down a bit, and that was only because it was going through. I think it was the realization that she for me was my soulmate, but stereotypically it probably wasn't someone. I don't know, in your head you have this ideal person, in this ideal life, and for some reason it didn't quite fit the box, but she was the one for me. And then and it's not a joke, but literally it took 10 years from when I met her to her finally saying yes to going out with me. We had a few stumbled dates, but it literally took 10 years and we just became friends, and I forgot about it. But 10 years later, we finally started dating. So it's like the culmination of 10 years and having relationships and then finding, oh my goodness, this is the person for me. After 10 years of going, and then realizing that you're now with the person of your dreams and your soulmate, and, to then lose it, and then to be losing my business as well, which is only a small business, but, we just lost money and had gone back to square one at early 40s. It's like, oh my goodness, I've worked all my life to here, and I don't have anything to show for it, and I don't have a relationship anymore. I think the thing that for me was, I just remember say very vehemently, I know how far I can swim down and hold my breath for, and I know if I go a bit further I can swim further down and I won't be able to get back up because I know how long I can hold my breath for on the best of the best days. So I figured if I go, that's all I need to do. I just won't be able to get back to the surface without, and, I'm not going to tell anyone, I just wouldn't be there. So I kind of thought about it, how peaceful it would be. And I think it was then just going, well, what's stopping you? And it was like, well, no matter how bad everything gets. And then obviously I think at that time it was before that stimulated a lot of the learning that I did. But there's a book by Viktor Frankl called, I can forget now. Someone will be there and listening to your podcast going, it's Man's Meaning or something. Viktor Frankl, he was in the worst concentration camps ever. He lost his family, they slaughtered his family and kids and everything. But he still managed to come through with some hope, and also the fact that he accepted that it was as a result of choices he's made throughout his life along his way that he actually ended up in these concentration camps, which arguably was very difficult to contend with, because you have made choices, they've just led to this part in your life. So for whatever reason, how much you feel like a victim, or however, there's no one, I mean, there's no one that's lived a worse scenario than that, and he's come out on the other side of it, and he wrote this book, and it's like, well, if he can do that, then I can find another, I'll find somebody else. Maybe I won't. I can start another business. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll work for someone else. Maybe I'll just, I don't know. There was so much that you could do that it was just a switch, but the switch had to be that whatever you've been doing, I haven't figured it out yet, but it hasn't worked for you. It hasn't really panned out, and there's some good things and some bad things. So just focus on the strengths, and now just do things differently. And for me, it was literally the starting point was I used to get up at 7:15 and grab a coffee and some toast and get to work for 8, and then I started getting up, again, it feels cliche now, 7-8 years later, it's so much out there, but I'd get up at 5, I'd go to the beach, I'd run, I'd have cold showers. I haven't had a warm shower since the only warm shower I've had is at the pool with my daughter when we were showering afterwards. Even when I had COVID, I just didn't shower for like 3 or 4 days because I didn't want to have a warm shower, to my wife's detriment. But cold showers, early start today, exercise in the morning, get rid of the cortisol, meditate every day, do breathwork every day. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but it's just an hour in the morning, and then you've got time to relax and do a bit of journaling. And so my morning routine is like many, many people's out there have this morning routine, sets you up for the day. It's almost religious, as in, I will do everything to make sure that happens. I can have jet lag and have a terrible night's sleep. Just get up. It doesn't matter that you just get on and do it. And that was the start of then starting to change that mindset. So let's just do things differently. Do the opposite of what I have been doing. And so instead of saying no to things, instead of being relatively, I'd say almost antisocial, I'd say yes to certain things. Instead of just poo-pooing some of this other stuff, let's really, really open our eyes, just immerse ourselves in it, pick out the things that seem to work, try a lot of them, and then see if anything comes of it. And of course, lots of stuff does come of it. And then the learning and the coaching, and I'm going to do that coaching course, and Tony Robbins, and Tom Billio, and Joe Dispenza, and all those sort of things. Just let's immerse ourselves and see what comes out the other side. And then 2 years later, a lot of things have changed, and it did bring my wife and I get back together. And so I suppose that and the business kind of got back on its feet, and then One Life kind of sort of grew out of that, and it's been really good.
Do you think looking within and taking responsibility when you look back was the biggest catalyst for change?
Yeah, 100%. I say that to me it was, you're the main protagonist in your own story. You got two choices here. Either you just keep doing what you're doing, and you're just gonna continue what you're doing. So something's not working. It would have been great to have gone, this isn't working, I'll change it. I don't really know what's not working, but fundamentally, whatever you've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, it's culminated in where you are now. So something's not working. So, don't look at everything from a critical point of view. When your wife says, well, you say you're going to do this and you don't do it. And it's like, well, I'll bloody well do this. And it's, well, yeah, no, you didn't. You did it for a little bit, or you did part of it. But actually, when you tell someone that, or you're going to do this, or if you say that you're, communicative, it's like you're communicative in your own way, but you're not actually understanding what they want in terms of communication, or in terms of your business. Well, you're doing this, and this. But actually, that's not the right, it's not working. So you've got to just look at everything and just ultimately, just bear all. And I think that was the thing for me, became terrifyingly vulnerable I had my own counsellor, as it were. I was having a lot of counselling myself to understand some of these things. They said, well, look, you left home at 15, at 13, as far as you were concerned in terms of your family, if you like, and your father, It wasn't they were dead to you per se, but you were already out the door. At 15, you're out the door. You had to survive. You did survive, and you paid your rent, and you put food on the table, and you worked, and you've been doing that ever since. So and if anyone else comes into your life, then it's a threat because you can survive on your own. And the irony is, when I met my wife, she's exactly the same. She survived in the world, and you look at those things and go, it's hard to disseminate it because it's obviously in at your core and it's in at a cellular level and it's everything you believe and your core values and everything. And then to actually go back and even as an exercise to just break down your values and what you actually value is way different now to what I valued then. And these things worked for me then because it was survival. And now I was still in survival mode, but I didn't need to be. It's kind of like, having, PTSD in a way. It's like you're living on the edge all the time and you think everybody's going to jump out and try and kill you. And of course, you just can't then integrate with things and you can't change things because you're just so shut off to it. So to peel that all back was like, well, this is going to be really uncomfortable. And the worst thing about it, I think, was that I realized that it was never going to happen overnight. It's not like I could just knock on your door and say, I'm sorry and everything's fine. This is going to be a lengthy process and you've got to really start embedding those changes. And those changes are going to be hard and it's going to take discipline and tenacity. And you have no guarantee of the outcome either. And I think that's the biggest thing. But equally, I still have it in my phone today. I'm now excited about the uncertainty of the future, as opposed to always wanting to know what left and right, plan A, plan B, plan C. It doesn't mean I don't plan. It doesn't mean I have goals. But the future is uncertain, and that's exciting. Whereas before, it used to terrify me because I wanted to know and I needed to know where I was going to be. But the reality is, I never really got there.
It's fascinating. Do you find you've been able to overcome a lot of that, I guess, trauma that we'll call it trauma, but the childhood shapes you massively. It shapes your psyche massively and the way you see the world, the way you see yourself. And leaving home at such an early age, I'm sure your counsellors have all talked you through this, but have you been able to overcome, I guess, those fears that your subconscious has been holding on to?
Yeah, and it's a good question. That took a long time because... and I still catch myself today. I don't think you ever don't in some ways kind of catch yourself, like you use the word victim mentality, and maybe it can get overused, but it's probably a really good just way of defining a state of mind is that if only this, why that? Why couldn't I have been that? Why couldn't that have happened? And you just go down. I went down that rabbit hole on too many occasions, and anxiety then just cripples you. I was in bed for 3 days in the fetal position in tears for 3 whole days. Literally I could not get out of bed. It's the worst feeling in the world when you just compare yourself to everyone else. You just wish your life was different, and then also you're embarrassed that you're not strong enough to just pull yourself out and pardon my French, but get your shit together and move on, because sometimes it takes that. It takes more of a rattling than it does just be it's fine, it's not fucking fine. It really isn't. You've just actually got to shake that, and now's the time to stop. You can grieve, you can reflect on it for a bit, and now you've got to draw a line in the sand. And for me, it was like, I suppose I've got to the point now that in some ways it's kind of parked there, that sometimes I use it as a reminder that if I went from almost wanting, well, definitely not necessarily wanting to be here, but seriously considering not being in this world, to where I'm now, and I'd love to be sitting here as a very successful person, in all these other ways, and business person or whatever. I'm just a normal guy having a normal life, which is a life on my terms, and in a relationship that is absolutely with someone I want to spend the rest of my life with, and having a beautiful daughter. All those things, to me, that's very successful. But there's so many other things to do as well, and I think it's living to your potential. There's so much more potential, but I use that. I do have that parked. I sometimes go back to the edge of that precipice and just to remind myself, knowing full well I'll never go over. I'm not even going to take a step down there. But on the bad days, I remind myself of where I was and what it felt like, and I can just allow myself 5 minutes to actually just feel those feelings again, which becomes very emotional as a real trigger to move forward. So I would say definitely move past it, but maybe consciously or deliberately not try to blank out all those feelings, because they're quite powerful to keep that motivation going, because you start moving along and it's so easy to kind of slip back into some sort of level of mediocrity. And we've had a few clients, and they've made massive changes. They've come off antidepressants and so on, and life's going great, and they stopped doing certain things, and we've had conversations the last month where they said, I know exactly what went wrong, you know, and I kind of stopped doing all these things that are changing, you know, because ultimately, you know, yeah, sometimes, you know, you are going to slip back, but, you know, at least you've now got the tools and that mindset to kind of get back on, you know, to shifting things. But life can take over pretty quickly, and, you know, life throws things at us. And I think for me as well, I thought I could control life better than I could. And then when you realize you got no control over life, you know, there's certain things you do have some influence on control over, and they're very few. So just focus on those, because life is going to throw stuff if you let right and center to everybody. And you're not a victim. It's just life. It's just how you choose to deal with it. And that for me is, I think it was Carol Dweck who wrote a book about mindset. I think she coined the phrase anti-fragile. So that, and to be anti-fragile is absolutely amazing, because it said, you know, it doesn't matter what happens. You know, you're not going to break me again.
What's your relationship been like with showing your emotions? I know, like, a lot of old men, there's like, I'm not old, I wouldn't call you old.
Thank you.
I guess, well, I'm 22, so
yeah.
In comparison to, what's it been like with emotions? Like, because I know, like, for example, my dad, like, quite stoic and reserved with emotions, and always have to put on this front.
Yeah.
Scared of, you know, being in touch with his emotions. Like, the way I've actually learned a lot about emotions and what almost in how I don't want to be is sometimes I look to my dad, because I'm like, I just feel sorry for him because he doesn't have the ability to go within.
Yeah.
What's your journey been like with that, and how is like this word we throw around a lot, vulnerability, being able to transform you?
So 100% when I was your age, yeah, but that's my dad and grandparents and everyone, totally stoic. I don't think I properly cried, certainly not since I left home. And prior to that, for at least 10 years. I think memories fade a little bit from memory, because I remember having a similar sort of conversation along these lines. I think it was 29 before I actually cried about something, literally. And that was when my granddad passed away, who I was very close to. And he was very influential on my life, I suppose. But that was, maybe 15 years, I don't remember shedding a tear. And then, you know, that things shifted then, and then subsequently they shifted even more. So showing the emotions it feels so powerful, because I can tear up having a conversation with you. I can get goosebumps because I can let the emotions there, and it feels very, very powerful in an emotive way. But there's very good reminders of certain things, and also to be able to sort of let some of those feelings out, so you're not containing it all. It's certainly not building up. It's certainly not becoming a toxic, you know, internally, this toxicity that builds up with not showing emotions. So I guess it was like, yeah, well, I can cry at the paper bag, but I can be the toughest guy I know at the same time in terms of mentally. And I think probably with maybe some of the things we've done with the ice baths and some of the coaching stuff and the retreat we've run, you know, we do 14-hour days. So you're up at 5:30 and we're doing stuff. And then by the time you've had the evening meal and debrief, it's 8:30 at night. And, you know, I can go, you know, it's tiring, don't get me wrong, but I can keep going, and there's a lot, it almost breaks people down. They're just exhausted. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of like, on one hand, you can be very, very strong and very, very motivated. On the other hand, you know, you can openly cry. I can hold my daughter and tear up. I can see something and send to my wife, you know, a picture of something and just say, this reminds me of you, and break down in tears. I can watch a movie and let myself well up because it's sad, and I don't have any issues with it at all. And I think that for a lot of people, like say, you become very stoic. I'm English, so, you know, typically English are very stoic. You know, everything's fine. It's just not fine. You know, so I think to learn to be comfortable with that, and then to understand that, you know, if you can take on any situation and deal with it in an emotive way as well as from a physical point of view, then, and you can get through, and you know there'll be a solution, and you will be able to find your way, and you know you'll be making conscious choices without being driven by those emotions, then you become very powerful, I suppose. And powerful, I mean, in terms of as a human being, you know, and I think that's great, and I think it helps bond with people and create integrity and honesty. I feel sorry for my daughter. She's 15 months old. I said, oh my God, now you've got a mum and a dad like we have. She's either going to be amazing or she's going to leave home at 15 and hate us as well. Hopefully not that one. But it's, you kind of have all this sort of knowledge now that I wish I'd had when I was your age. And it's so cool to see the younger generation coming through with all this stuff now. And I just feel so grateful that for whatever reason, those things led me to get, so I finally kind of, I don't know, cracked the code, if you like, because I could have easily gone for the next 20 or 30 years and never figured it out. But also gone through the next 20 or 30, 40 years and had this feeling of, discontent, if you like, or incongruency, because I'm not living true to who I really am. And that's what sort of this pit starts building up, and you start, what is this? Why don't I feel content in life? Why am I not happy with these things? Why I'm chasing something else? It's because we haven't really figured out what we want and found something that we feel, gives us purpose and direction. And I think that, to a certain extent, and I'm only speaking in hindsight, comes as you get older, because as you get older, you can only then reflect and go, well, has my life had that purpose and meaning that I wanted out of it? Did I even know what that meant when I was 20 or 30? Because at the time, all I wanted to do was windsurf, and I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was a loving time and as a very caring person, but I didn't want anything else. I don't think I'd want to go back I'd love to go back to 21 and do it all over again, I'm sure, but I don't think I'd change those things, but I'd be consuming myself in the stuff that you are and doing what you're doing as well. And I think you'll find more purpose in what you're doing and pick a future career path or a relationship or where you want to live and, what you want to get out of the next 2, 5, 10 years of your life. You'll actually make choices that I certainly didn't make those choices. And there's clearly people that are doing it and doing amazingly well and doing way better than I've ever done. But, for some reason they maybe stumbled on that path sooner. I'm just glad I've stumbled on it, in the last few years.
How did you overcome, I guess, the shame of like being able to cry and not be okay? I feel like a lot of men, even today, like, to be honest, like so many even younger people I know, like in their 20s, still struggle with this. The whole like being able to voice that they're struggling or voice that they don't have life figured out, they don't have the answers, they need help. There's just a lot of shame around it. Even sometimes, like, I notice it within myself, just like you don't want to be that guy who's complaining or is unsure of things. But how have you been able to, on your journey, like have that balance of like being okay with not having it figured out and asking for help, but then also that flip side, like the strong masculine man that can get shit done, like that's the beautiful blend. But I think there's a lot of fears that if you go one way, you're not going to be able to come out the other side.
Yeah, good questions, Egan. That's a good point. Now you just said that, that's an interesting point about feeling that you're going down that route and then you just become this sort of emasculated being that just cries all the time and sits in the corner. But I suppose because I'd been so stoic and the other way for such a long time and had to just to survive when I left home. And I meant to survive, and we're talking about living in England in a perfectly fine place. It's not like growing up in some terrible countries with lots of stuff going on. So it's survive as in you just got to put food on the table and go to work and pay your bills. But I think part of it is because you feel, because that gives you such a sense of power is probably the wrong word, but over yourself, power, control over yourself and your emotions, and you're making choices. And if your choices at the moment, this is how you're feeling, then let it out, and then, but you feel so comfortable doing that it enables you to be able to participate in that part of life, I suppose, because you can let yourself go and be vulnerable. And because the ultimate goal, and again, a guy called Tom Bilyeu, I'm not sure people out there would be following him or seen him, but I don't know if he coined the phrase, but it's all ultimately it's about how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. So you can put on whatever show you like to the world, whether it's online or in face or in a book or on a blog or whatever But ultimately, in the depths of the night, when you're lying there, how do you feel about yourself when you're by yourself? So for me, it's just the driver. It's such a powerful driver. I get goosebumps when I say it because it's very much like I feel now so strong in myself that I can be like that. At the same time, I can go and do this other stuff, and then, it's not a case of then getting in an MMA fight and being able to kick the ass out of someone. My martial art days are long gone. But it just means you can tackle those things. And probably there are times, definitely times where you sort of have to almost to yourself toughen up. Yes, it's hard. You're going through, there's a lot of hard things and life is throwing some curveballs at you. And I think a big learning curve for me, as well as being now become a father, but going through that at a late stage, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. I recommend it to everybody. But there's days when, you know, I've got COVID, my daughter's got COVID, my wife's got COVID, my dog's had a stroke. You know, you're doing all these other things. Financially, you might be struggling a little bit because work's been a bit quiet or whatever. You know, you can be the victim in a heartbeat, and everyone's going to go, wow, that's tough. But to then actually just go, this is just part of life. And I have a number of, you know, little sort of mini reminders. Every single day they go off on my phone at 5 o'clock, and every single day I still read them, and they've been there for like 7-8 years now. And they say the same, you know, it's the same thing, but every day I remind myself, and this is what you're doing, this is what life's about, this is the roller coaster you're on, and it's all part of that. And wouldn't it be boring if it was just the same and you could pick it all and say the excitement of the unknown? And the only thing that would scare the pants off me, and we had a very, very big scare a few years ago when my wife had a brain injury, is your health. So within reason, I'm still going to have a glass of red wine every now and again, or, you know, more than now and again, but I don't drink every day. I'm not, you know, the healthiest eater, but far from unhealthy eating. You know, you pick it all, just, you know, still a balance. But within reason, you know, don't go and eat donuts, sit on the couch, drink, you know, pints of beer, and then expect your health to be perfect, you know. So if you want to optimize, then there's things you can do, but there's way more extreme ways to live, and way healthier and fitter, and, you know, but again, that can be considered extreme. So do the things that you can to optimize your life, and then in those situations, if your health is there or it's only temporary illness, then you can tackle anything, and that's really, really empowering. And I think that's the thing that we want to give people. And for most people who I see or talk to or coach or work with, it's all I try and do is give them almost like that glimmer of hope, that, you know, that 1 or 2 degrees difference setting the sails. So you'll be just sailing a different path, and that's all my intention is. Because if you do that, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy then, you know, as opposed to giving, you know, yes, there's lots of stuff we can talk about, mindset, and we do, and lots of things you can talk about and do and so on. But ultimately, you just want to give people that hope that actually there is something else out there. And if you go down this route, you have a choice of how you're going to live your life, and you're going to get to choose what you do in these situations. You don't get to guarantee them, but you do get to make choices along the way. And that's super empowering, and knowing that you can cope with that. So
I think what I've struggled the most with in terms of emotions is the balance of feeling emotions, because I used to be a big overthinker, where it was like, instead of feeling it, like actual feeling, like you've talked about, alluded to, like you're able to actually feel the emotions, get goosebumps, cry. Like I was, as a coping mechanism for wanting to avoid that, I used to just play it out in my head, and overthink to deal with that as like a coping mechanism. But now it's this real balancing act of like, how do I balance feeling this, whatever's happening, and actually like acknowledging it, dealing with it, versus like just getting on with it and using my mindset to make strong choices. It's like that balance of just like sitting in that feeling, but like for not too long. Like, how do I acknowledge it, not sort of distract myself from it, but then also know that I've got an opportunity to use my mindset to make the best choice for myself, because it's so easy to distract yourself from, I guess,
procrastinate or ruminate.
And also like, I think with the society's pushing positivity, and I do a lot, but it's like sometimes we also, it's optimism, but we're also sort of procrastinating from uncomfortable conversations with ourselves. Like, because I'm very optimistic, but sometimes I've caught myself just every time something goes wrong, instead of feeling that, I'll just make an excuse for why it will be fine and work itself out, which leads you to sort of avoiding, you're not able to go through discomfort, because what happens is that you can only do that for so long. I feel like you can only be so, I don't even know how to explain it, but you can't put on that front for so long, like everything's okay.
Yeah.
It's almost like that in a different way. And I get, it's sort of stoic, but it's like, it's not like there's an awareness that things aren't okay, but it's like using my mind to cope with it.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So I think if I can go, so on that, I'll give you some, my thought on that is, firstly, you know, when you meditate on things, so meditation and the breath work is a really good way of getting into meditation very quickly. So you don't have to go and meditate for hours on end. but you actually just sit in that for 5 or 10 minutes. That's all you need to do. But just the more you can do, the better. But you don't have to sit there for hours on end. But I think the thing is, one is you get stuck. Everyone gets stuck. It's very easy to just try and think your way out of it, and you can only possibly think in your conscious mind. So you're literally, it's your consciousness and just what you know and historically what you've learned. That's just going to process the information, and most of the time, all you're doing is just rehashing the same thing that's gone through your head. So you sort of end up ruminating, trying to come up with a solution to something that's not yet happened. So you're really stuck on that. So you need to get out of that conscious mind, partly. So hence meditation and being able to just sit back and just let things come up. Super, super powerful. And I don't know anybody from all the books I've read and the interviews and everything, and be no secret that any of the sort of successful people out there, they all meditate, amongst other things. The other thing is, one thing which is really powerful for me is that when you're in those in any situation, you got to make a choice, and that could be a big choice. What am I going to do for the next 5 years? What job do I want to do, or what decision I'm going to make now? Is just imagine yourself in a room with 1,000 doors and they're all open, and your only job, sole job, is to pick a door and shut the other 999 and go through that door, and that's it. You step through that door, that's it. All the other distractions go. There's no other shiny things. That's the decision you've made, and you go down that route and you just give everything 100%. There's no other doors that are open. If you go down that route and then you think you've made a wrong choice or it's not panning out, you can come back into the room and then pick another door. But what most of us do, we just leave half the doors open. We step one toe in, one toe out, and there's just too many. There's 1,000 doors. You got to pick one. And so I can't pick one, and that's the problem. Most people can't pick a door to go through. But as soon as you pick one and you take action, you've got to do that. So if you take action, whatever that is, you will be moving forward. And it might be a case of it. You move forward, and then you realise, no, this isn't right, or this isn't panning out. Then you can tick that bit off the list. You go, okay, it's an experiment. I've learned that. Edison, 1,000 experiments before he hit the light bulb. When he set a light to his factory or workshop, they said, well, isn't that crazy? And he said, no, it's just one other reason that's not going to work that way. It's great. I can tick that one off. It's another one down. So I'm closer now to getting where I need to get to. And I think that's really, really powerful. You actually just make that decision and go. And I forget the story with it was one of the generals, American generals or something. He was interviewed, I don't know, many years ago now or something. But they said, in this situation, I think it was to do with the Iraqi war, and they was asking about, the decisions that he made. He said, how on earth, when you got all these things, things are going on across the world, and you're making a decision to go in and do this or that, whatever it is. How on earth do you know? How on earth do you make those decisions? How do you know it's the right one? He said, I've basically got no idea if it's the right decision, but I cannot sit here and procrastinate because there isn't one right answer, and there will be casualties whichever thing you do, but you've got to pick one and go with it and go with 100% commitment, because you've then at that level you've got the whole of the the US forces behind you making on your decision, and you've got to instill that confidence. They've got to go. So at your own life, it's like, make a decision, pick it, stand by it, and go with it. It doesn't mean if it's not panning out, you sit there and keep going, in a stoic kind of way, going, oh, there's a work, or shit, I've made a bad decision here and I should just keep going and brave my face. Quite the opposite. Put your hand up and go, I made a mistake there, or this isn't working out how I wanted to. I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this and I want to do that. But it's making the decision and taking action, and that's so powerful, because again, you just keep moving. And there's a difference between moving forward or momentum and actually motion. So momentum and motion are two different things, where you can run on the spot, and I'm running, but you're running on the spot. You're not actually getting anywhere. So you can create motion, but you want to create momentum where you're actually moving forward, whichever that is. You might be moving forward in completely the wrong direction, but then you can reset the sails and change. But you are moving forward, and you're discounting those things as being that didn't work. So you're constantly learning. So I think that path to anti-fragility, if you like, is by being the constant learner, that everything is a learning experience. You cannot fail. You cannot fail in any way, shape or form. And that's super powerful. And it's great, because every time you get that, it's hard at first, and then it becomes almost part of your sort of subconscious vernacular. Okay, well, that didn't work out. Oh, okay, well, I've just learned something there. And if you haven't learned anything, go, oh, okay, well, I'm just still moving forward, because I'm not going to sit in one spot. And, life moves on, age moves on, your health deteriorates. So even standing still, you're going backwards. So you have to keep moving forward. And if you're motivated by that and you can feel the adventure in that, then whatever you do, it's a learning experience, and you're going to be growing. And that's really what it boils down to. So you can sit in bed at night and go, I do feel good about myself. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
I like that. I think it's pretty hard to grow without vulnerability. I feel like the power of vulnerability is it makes sure it helps you be a lot more intentional, I feel, because you're able to reflect on what's important to you, powerful to you. I feel like a lot of people like spin the wheels. There's a lot of motion. They think they're going places, but because they're so trapped in this pigeonhole and so scared to have uncomfortable conversations, explore themselves, that 5 years later they realize, yes, there was motion, but there was no authentic momentum. They weren't really taking themselves on that inner journey because they were so scared to confront these things. But what I've noted is, and the incentive for young people to tap into this space is, and you'll probably agree, is if you don't do this now, like it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And all you're doing is giving yourself the skills, the mindset to make the most out of what's inevitably going to happen in your life, which is ups and downs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's so great seeing the younger generation, if you like, this next generation. So I never thought I'd be in the position where I'm saying the younger generation, but it's true, you know, and you are, you know, skilling yourself with those things, and also being aware and being able to tap into your own emotions. So when life throws those things at you, and that can only happen in life. You know, some people have lost parents early on, some people have lost, you know, the health, or they've, you know, had some, you know, really traumatic experiences at a young age. And that's, you know, how people deal with that. I really don't know, you know, because you just have to go through it. You don't have the ability to look back and then go, okay, well, that's how I dealt with it then. But if you've got those skills, and you know, you can actually sort of go into battle, if you like, and know that you've got the skills to survive. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It just means that you know that you'll be able to get through, and you know you can make some decisions that are probably going to influence in a positive way how it's going to how the outcome's going to be. And I think that is really, really cool, because the younger generation is so much of a sort of a groundswell now, people getting into that. I never thought I'd see, you know, 500 people, you know, with the cold nips down at Scarborough Beach at 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, who would ever do that? Aren't you just partying until whatever time, and you just sleep until 11? Isn't that what you guys do? Because I did. And now you just go, well, you know, you'd rather get up and do that because you feel good for it, and you know the physical and mental benefits are there from doing some of these things, but also the social connection and everything else is super, super important. And you're connecting with people who have similar interests, and you know, I think that kind of community of people, which is lost from, you know, the historic days when we lived in little communities of, you know, 150, 200 people. If you weren't part of that community, you were literally ostracized, and you were put outside of that, and you die. You wouldn't survive the winter. So, you know, we're sort of built to be in these communities, and now we just isolate from that, or we're just in, you know, we don't have this real purpose in that group anymore. We might be the larrikin, or we might just do that, but it's not, you know, is that really, really what you want to do? And for some people, they just don't know. And, you know, and that's, you know, for a lot of people, they just don't know. But you can sort of figure out along the way what for the next stage of your life, whether that's a week, a month, or a year or two, you know, what it is you're going to do, rather than just drift along and then potentially regret it. And so you get to my age and you sort of go, well, kind of just drifted around, and, you know, I don't know. But you can say, well, you did that and you did that and you did that. I said, yeah, I did. But there's only a few of those things that were like real conscious decisions that I set out and went to do, because, you know, a lot of those things just kind of came along and, you know, buffeted off that way and buffeted off that way. And, you know, it's literally you're sailing around and you go, oh, but you sail from here to here. So, yeah, but I kind of thought I'd be over there, because I didn't really pay attention to it, and I hadn't really got the skill set. And along the way, you know, I nearly sunk the boat, and the mast broke, and I didn't know how to fix it and everything else. And you go, I don't feel like I was really sort of living a life how I wanted to. And now for the first time in, you know, for the last few years, but, you know, at my age, it's, you know, it's finally got to the point where I'm actually living a life that I'm sort of choosing, you know. And if I was to do it all again, I'd be probably in a different situation. But I think your generation's got a really, really good opportunity to now build on what's there, and also the science as well. When it comes down to that side of mental health and the physical benefits of some of the things we've touched on, and you're talking about, then, you know, all the science is there, and the studies are there now to actually go, well, you know, before it was like, well, you could easily poo-poo it as a bit woo-woo hippie stuff. And you say hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, people having ice baths and doing breath work and things like that. And it's just, you know, it's just not brought to the masses. And now we can actually prove why it's working at a cellular level and a biological level, you know, mental level, a brainwave, you know, level. You can, the proof is there, the studies are there, and you can look at it and go, oh, okay, well, you don't have to do it, but yeah, it's evident that this stuff works, or indeed doesn't work. So you go, well, okay, now I'm sort of equipped with the information and the knowledge, then, it's up to me whether I choose to do that, whether I choose to smoke or not, or to drink Coca-Cola or not. It's your choice, but it's pretty strong evidence that those aren't good for you, and they are. So
exactly. I heard this story that I think sort of resonates a lot with your personal journey. I don't know if you've heard it. I'll give you the spoil at the end. So there was a writer. He was working. This was probably 90 years ago, maybe 100 years ago. He was writing in Switzerland, trying to become, was in Switzerland working as this newspaper correspondent, was trying to make it as an author, which is especially hard to do back in those days. And he was in Switzerland and met this bloke who was like the chief editor of like the American magazine, some popular press company or something. And he showed him some of his work and he was quite impressed. So he wanted to see more, but you can't email things back in those days. So he got his wife to travel from where they lived in Paris to Switzerland, bring all his work in a massive suitcase. On the journey, they stopped somewhere. She went out to get a drink, come back, and the suitcase is gone. All of his life's work, this is 10, 15 years worth of all of his writing, is gone, and his massive opportunity is just blown. It's not saved on an external hard drive somewhere. Yeah. She ends up getting there to him. It's gone. And what happens in that moment for that writer? Obviously, initially he's going through it, right? Victim mentality, fair enough. His massive opportunity has gone. He makes a conscious choice in that moment that he's going to make a change with how he's writing. He's going to start being authentic. He's going to take a risk. And I guess with this fresh start, he doesn't have like the shackles of the past to sort of, you know how we go through things and we think we always have to do it that way. It was a clean slate. He had all these writing skills, but it was a fresh opportunity to reinvent himself. So he changed his writing style. And within 3 years, he was probably the most famous writer in American history. Not novelist, sorry. Do you know what his name is?
Yeah.
Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, right. Wow.
So I found that story so powerful because he lost everything, right? He lost all of his work. But in that moment, he found himself. He found this authentic voice. He became renowned for his writing style in that moment because he made a change. But I think the power in that is like that story could have gone a totally different way, but he used that as an opportunity to start again. And I guess on your journey, you've had things, I guess, lose things, but then able to reinvent yourself.
And yeah, that's true. And I think if there's anything I could ever put out in the world as a legacy, if you like, and that's obviously a big, bold statement, is that for me, it'd be like to impart on anybody who wanted to listen, is that please make those changes. Look at these things before you hit rock bottom. Why do you have to hit rock bottom? Because unfortunately, I've had a couple of people, and I've commented on my own story on the website, that they did take their own lives. They hit rock bottom and they're not with us today. And I think many people would know someone who's not with us today for they just couldn't see a way forward. It usually takes people hitting rock bottom before they make those changes, and it's like, well, how sad is that? What if we could stop the elevator before it hit the bottom? And actually make those changes. And if say your generation doing what you personally are doing now is amazing, because you'll, potentially you'll never actually hit rock bottom, whatever that rock bottom is, and that's different for everybody. But and Miss Hemingway's story as well, it's potentially you make a choice, because you could have, like say, the story could have been that's it, it's disastrous and just give up and I don't know, whatever. I think it's just if we can get to the point where you're making those changes, but usually these are things that aren't essential in terms of today. It's like taking vitamins. If you take a multivitamin, a good one, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and feel better for it, or the next day, or the next day, or the next day. It just doesn't work like that. But in 10, 15, 20 years time, maybe that and healthy diet generally, and not smoking, not drinking too much, all those things, not drinking at all, you're going to, it will pay dividends. And it's a bit like working in your own mental health and that. Until you get to the point where life throws some big curlies at you, and also, maybe 2 or 3. So, everyone hits 1 or 2. It's when you've gone through 10 or 20 years and you're getting, say, it feels like that's probably where that cliche midlife crisis comes from, which seems that everyone, it's in your 40s or thereabouts, people have these midlife crises. or maybe that's where it sort of came from. You've just had enough time of life that's thrown enough things at you, because it just will do. Everyone will have to face them. That you just, some people get a bit more worn down, or a few too many things come in at the same time, and people can't cope very well. And we don't have those coping skills. We're not taught them. Just as at school, we're not generally taught about finances or things like that. And so, you know, if we were all taught what we know now in school, I think financially we'd all be a lot more stable and set up, but then it wouldn't necessarily serve, you know, the government system for paying taxes and everything else. So, you know, that's, you know, I'm not saying that's why it's not taught in schools, but, you know, if you learn these skills earlier on, you know, it's amazing the benefits you're going to get later, but you don't see it instantaneously. And I think that's why it's so easy to do these things or not. But I think as things are changing, we're realizing that, you know, these are really important and they're really useful, and they're going to stand us in long-term stead. So I think if you can not hit rock bottom and keep going, then that would be, you know, that's a really good thing to look at. And I just pick up on one thing, we're talking little stories, because you said about, you know, you're quite optimistic in that, and obviously optimism is it's a really powerful thing, and, you know, period. There's a guy called Simon Sinek, I don't know if you've seen his stuff, and he was just one story that jumped into mind. He did like this City of Surf. It was like the equivalent of the City to Surf, where in Seattle or wherever he's from. And they came to the end of the race. And the end of the race, he was with a mate of his, and there's a big lineup of tables where they've got bagels. They were all having different bagels, you know, cinnamon bagel and raisin bagel. And you queue up and you get a free bagel at the end of the race. You just queue up and get your bagel. And Simon's telling the story to his mate. He said, well, he said, hey, you know, free bagel. And his mate looks at the queue and goes, oh, yeah, queue. Yeah, but free bagel. Yeah, but I don't know. I just can't be on this queue. And he said, but it's a free bagel. And he said, oh, no. So he said he went over to the big queue, and he kind of just reached through the crowd, put his hand in, grabbed a couple of bagels and said, here's your bagel. And the point being is that, you know, you either see the opportunity or you see the hurdle. And his friend, just all he could see was the queue, the hurdle. All he could see was an opportunity. You can still get the bagel as long as you're not stopping anyone else from getting there. So by reaching through, you don't get to choose which bagel you get. You queue up if you want to get the cinnamon bagel, and you wait for the queue to go down. But you can still have a bagel because you're not stopping anyone else from getting what they want. But at the same time, there's the opportunity to get something as well, and you find a solution in life. And I think that's probably one of those things that, in terms of optimism, putting in, you know, what does that actually mean? It's, well, you know, when something happens, there's always a different way to look at things. So it doesn't mean there's a right and a wrong, a black and a white, but it's having the opportunity to see something that's there where a lot of people can't see that at all. And, you know, you've got to change how you think about things to start seeing the potential opportunities. And that in its own right makes life more optimistic, because it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all some big queue that you just can't be bothered to queue up for. So
I saw a really good quote or a framework around positivity that I think I really, really like. And it was talking about how positivity is not about sort of deluding yourself that everything right now is amazing and these shit emotions are okay and you want to feel like this, but it's knowing that things will work out and you will be okay, and having that sense of hope. I think that's realistic optimism, and that's positivity. And it doesn't mean right now is amazing, but it's knowing things are going to get better, I think, and trusting in yourself and what's going to come for you. I think that's a great way to sort of level out life's, like the reality of life, or else you're constantly comparing. There's so many studies that show if people's goal is happiness, they actually become more dissatisfied, because they're comparing all of their emotions to this ideal of happiness, which is this constant gap, this lack. Alluding back to working on your mental health, I think the reason people struggle to do it is because it's really hard to see progress, and it's really hard to realize how far you're actually getting, because it's the whole gym analogy, and you don't, and whatever, for anything you do, it's hard to see the reward of it. I think setbacks are so tangible, like something big happens to you, you lose a partner, a business, anything. It's so, you can see it, but the little things you do, those small choices you make each day to work on yourself, to meditate, to go to the gym, to reflect, hard conversations, they're so small. So I think a lot of us just don't do them. Some of them are really easy to do, but that also means they're easy not to do. But after months and years, they accumulate. And when you are tested, when you are really tested, I think a lot of people don't have the skills because they spent years and years avoiding doing 100%. Those little things that would add up.
Yeah. Beautiful quote from that is sweat more in training, bleed less in battle. Just so many, and I've just come, so we just finished a retreat, and it's just, and we caught up with everyone a month ago, and we caught everyone last week, or not everyone, some can make it. And we're just having this conversation. I said, the fact is, that sort of arguably say that this doing stuff in the morning, having a morning routine or something that you do, and it, it doesn't have to be, militant, but if nothing else, outside of being a healthy way to start your day or to give you those benefits of doing a bit of exercise and the meditation and so on, it's building discipline. And so many people don't have discipline. They don't even know what it looks like. And so unless you train in a sport or something and you go and train 3 or 4 times a week and you're in a team, or you do martial arts or something, and you're doing those things, then how do you actually build discipline? And so we're having this conversation. I said, but the fact that you just, you can easily do that if you want to do it. It's nothing difficult about getting up at 5:30 and going for a 10 or 15 minute jog down the beach, jumping in the ocean. There's nothing hard about it. But when you do it day in, day out, and then the storm comes through and you're doing it day in, day out, and then it's colder, and then, and then you've had a terrible night's sleep and you still that's called discipline, because you're doing it when you don't want to do it. And that in its own right is building that mental tenacity. Having cold showers, it's the same thing. I said, I don't want to have a warm shower because I feel so invigorated and so good having a cold shower. But even at we're living in Perth, Western Australia, so a cold shower isn't really a thing compared to living in, say, in Europe. But nonetheless, it is pretty cold in the mornings at the moment. But it's building that tenacity, and you're building the discipline around those things to know that you've got it when you need it. And that's, like you say, you just don't know until you need it. And you can't go, well, if I could do it if I wanted to. And so, well, yeah, but anyone can do it if they wanted to, unless you've got a physical impairment. Anyone can do it. That's not the point. You're doing it. And we're not talking David Goggins, doing the extreme that he does. I mean, quite the opposite. I mean, I'm sure that's pretty unhealthy. He's got a few points that well worth looking at. But it's just doing it because you want that discipline in your life. And it doesn't mean you live a disciplined life and you have to eat dinner at 6 o'clock and everything else. It just means that you built that mental discipline to be able to do these things when you don't want to. And that's the only difference. It's doing them when you don't feel like doing it, unless you're properly ill. And I think that's the thing that for me was like, I think that's the thing that's almost like really cool. It's because it's not a case of I know I'll do it. I do it. So no one else knows if I'm getting up at that time and doing it. I get up I put a little post out there. I've got a little spin the wheel app, and you spin the wheel and it sort of picks a time of day and an exercise. So I spin the wheel, I usually do it once a week or so. And, say Thursday, and between midnight and 4 a.m, and it'll say 2 o'clock, you're going to do a 3K run, or you're going to do a 4-minute ice bath, or a 10-minute breathwork session. So I spin the wheel and so far out. Okay, Thursday at 2 o'clock, I've got to do an ice bath. So I get up at 4 o'clock on Thursday and do an ice bath. And the only reason I do it, no one else knows. Half the time, my wife, she don't wake her up or anything, but you just do it because I just want to know that I've got that discipline or that tenacity that when life throws something at me, this is giving me that strength. And you can't get it like going to the gym. If you want to do that stuff, you've got to go and you've got to train to get stronger, to get fitter. And you can't just go out and crack out a 10K run if you can't run 2K without burning your legs out. So it's the only way you can do it. And I think these things, it's like you're actually doing it in a really healthy way. It's super beneficial, but you've got to build that discipline. I mean, a lot of people don't have it.
I saw a gym analogy, which was like, if you go to the gym and you only ever lift 5 kilo weights, you'll never realize how capable you are and how strong you are. I think like the reason I call my podcast Timeless Mindset, I rebranded it probably 6 months ago, was it's about like investing into yourself now so that you can create this timeless mindset to have with you for your whole life.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's the whole gist of it, is because I think I looked at a lot of people's stories, and I looked at a lot of the psychology. I looked at everything, and I'm like, when you look at the essence of what they've learnt, that those lessons can be learnt now. Those things we can teach ourselves, the discipline, the vulnerability, the consistency, the purpose, all of that, people had to learn retrospectively. But why don't we learn simultaneously as we're going through these experiences, reflecting along the way? And as I started to uncover my own journey and other people's journeys on this podcast, it's just become clearer and clearer to me, especially hearing your stuff today, how important it is to be reflecting and finding opportunities and Yeah, I think another thing is getting complacent. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, like, it's so easy with this mindset stuff, discipline stuff, to like think that it's like a destination.
Yeah.
Like, I think good habits, discipline, etc. Like, you need it. It needs to be something that you do and you can do forever, and keep yourself accountable to that. I think a lot of people think mental health is like, I have this disease, I have to cure it, then I'm finished. I think that's why a lot of people's conceptions of this space is wrong, and it's probably why they don't invest into it, because they think there's something not wrong with them. But it's less about curing and it's more about prevention and optimization.
I think what you say about the gym, I heard someone said the other day, doesn't like using the word mental health, it's mental exercise. And it's
mental fitness, is this?
Mental fitness or something.
Yeah,
maybe mental fitness. But the same thing, it's like you go to the gym or you do exercise, whatever it might be, because, you know, a lot of people do it because it's a sport that they do maybe, but then other people do it because ultimately that you've got to move your body in a certain amount, you've got to get your heart rate up a bit, and, you know, because otherwise your body's going to deteriorate. We're all going to deteriorate over time, but you're doing it because it's good for your physical health. But your mental health, it's like, well, you're fine. And so we don't see it as, like you're saying, until something goes wrong, and then historically it's been someone's had a mental breakdown, whatever that meant to them, and or that, you know, they're suicidal or they're depressed. And of course, you know, depression is, I don't know the stats in Australia, but there's something like around 6% of people who are on antidepressants, and don't quote me on this, but it's something like 6% of people on antidepressants actually have a major neurological and chemical defect of the brain, as in they need to have some sort of intervention, medical intervention, tablets and stuff. That leaves a huge percentage of people are basically just really sad. And they're sad for very good reasons. But, you know, the way that the system's set up, and I definitely don't want to go into that per se, but, you know, you go in, you've got to give them some tablets just in case they walk out the door and decide to take their lives, and you don't want to get sued. So, you know, they're not giving them these alternative options. So, well, you know, if you don't have a job and you go to Centrelink and they, you know, you sign on, you know, the I don't know if you call it the dole here, but, you know, you get Centrelink, you know, you've got to go back every week or fortnight or whenever it is and show that you've applied for, you know, half a dozen jobs. Really, if you're given antidepressants, you should say that, okay, you can prove that you've had, you know, 3 meditation sessions, you've been to the gym twice, and you've changed your diet or something. Otherwise, we're not giving you any more pills, because clearly not, you know, there's many other things that are likely to help and change. And there's that's a big rabbit hole to go down. But I think it's really, really important to see that people are actually sort of seeing this as just, like you say, just part of the process of kind of taking care of yourself. And if you take care of your health physically and mentally, you eat reasonably healthily, you know, whatever that looks like to you, then you're increasing your odds of, you know, being fitter and healthier for longer. And your mental health is huge, you know, and that all ties into that. Whereas before it's been something that's been defective, and then we've treated it accordingly.
Anyways, Mark, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time. We've covered a lot today. It's been good to hear some of your stories, and especially someone a little bit older than myself, and hear some of your wisdom. I really do appreciate your time and coming on and sharing all these things.
Oh, thanks for having me on, and I really think what you're doing is great. So yeah, keep it up. It's brilliant. Lovely to see it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks guys for listening.